Now we are going to AWS architect level interview question and answers. What is AWS? How does it differ from the traditional hosting? Hosting பத்தி கேட்குறோம். So AWS is a cloud computing platform providing on-demand resources and then services, allowing for scalable and cost-effective solutions compared to the traditional hosting. Okay. What are the key benefits of using the AWS distributed application? Key benefits. Okay. Scalability, high availability, global reach, and then wide ranges of services enable the quick deployment and then management of distributed applications. How will you ensure the high availability, right? High availability. Utilize multiple availability zones, elastic load balancing, and then auto scaling to distribute the traffic and handle the failovers. Multiple availability zone, elastic ELB, and then auto scaling, and then that is going to be distribute the traffic and also going to handle the failovers. What are all the differences between the EC2 and then Lambda? EC2 and Lambda go differences அப்படின்னு கேக்குறான். So EC2 provides the full control of the virtual server, while Lambda is serverless and event-driven, ideal for the microservices or short-lived task. How do you design the AWS architecture? Fault tolerance பத்தி கேக்குறான். So implement the redundancy across multiple zones. Use health checks and design for automatic failovers with the servers like RDS multi-zone and so on. What is the role of AWS S3 in the web application architecture? Role of S3. Okay. S3 provides the scalable and durable object storage for the static assets, backups, and then data lakes, enabling the efficient content delivery. And then, how do you secure the data in the transit and rest? In transit and then rest. எப்படி வந்து செக்யூர் பண்றது டேட்டாவை basically secure the question by using the TLS for data in the transit and then enable the server side encryption for data at the rest in the services like S3 and then RDS. Server side encryption, TLS. Okay. What is AWS cloud formation? How is it is used for architecture design? Cloud formation பத்தி கேக்குறான். Cloud formation is an infrastructure as a code service that allows you to define and then provision the AWS resources using the templates. Okay. How do you implement the CI/CD in the AWS environment? A code pipeline, code builder, code deployer to deploy, automate the build test and the deployment process for the applications. What are AWS availability zones? Why are they important? AWS zones are isolated data centers within the region that provide the high availability and then fault tolerance for the cloud applications. How do you manage AWS resources, permissions, and then access control? AWS identity and then access management to define the roles, policies, and then permissions for fine-grained access control. What is Amazon VPC? How does it contribute to the security? VPC allows you to create the isolated network within the AWS, providing the control over IP address ranges, subnets, and then security settings. How do you optimize the cost in the AWS architecture? Utilize the reserved instances, optimize the cost, reserves the instances, spot instances, and monitor the usage with the AWS Cost Explorer to manage the optimization expenses. What are AWS Lambda limits? How work with them? எப்படி வந்து அதை வந்து ஒர்க் பண்ணுவேன். Okay. Lambda has a limit on execution time 15 minutes, memory up to 10 GB, and then packages size is 50 MB. So design the functionality to fit into these constraints. How do you implement the microservices architecture using AWS? Services like AWS Lambda, API Gateway, EC2, ECS to deploy and manage the microservices in the decoupled manner. What strategies do you recommend for the monitoring and then logging in AWS? Use AWS CloudWatch log for monitoring and then AWS CloudTrail for logging API call combined with the centralized logging solutions like Elk. How do you handle the data migration in the AWS? Use AWS data migration services, DMS, for the data migration, and then AWS Snowball for large scale data transfer to the S3. What is the purpose of AWS Elastic Load Balancing (ELB)? ELB distributes incoming traffic across multiple instances, ensuring the availability and improve the fault tolerance. Availability, increase the fault tolerance, scalability, incoming traffic. Okay. How do you architect scalability in the AWS application? Design the stateless components, use auto scaling groups, and then implement load balancing to handle the very varying loads. What are the different type of AWS storage services are available? Types of storage services. Use S3 object storage, and then EBS for block storages in the EC2, and then EFS for shared file storage across multiple instances. How do you implement the serverless architecture in the AWS? Serverless architecture in the AWS. Combine the AWS Lambda API Gateway DynamoDB to create the fully serverless application without managing the services. What is AWS Direct Connect? AWS Direct Connect. Direct Connect provides a dedicated network connection from on-premises to the AWS, suitable for high throughput applications need low latency. How do you set up CDN with the AWS? Amazon CloudFront to cache the content at edge locations globally, improving the latency and the performance for users. What is the RDS? How does it simplifies the database management? RDS is a managed database service that automates the backups, patching, and then scaling, allowing you to focus on the application development. How do you ensure the compliance and then regulations? Compliance and then regulations. Implement the IAM policies and then enabling the logging with the cloud trail, and use the services like AWS config for compliance and then monitoring. What are global accelerator and its benefit? Global accelerator improves the availability and then performance by direct traffic to optimizing the endpoints based on the health and latency. How do you architect for disaster recovery in the AWS? Implement multi-region backups, use Amazon S3 for no data replication, and to design the failovers process to minimize the downtime. Data recovery பத்தி பேசுறோம். Okay. And then what is the well architected framework? Well architected framework. A well architected framework provides the best practices for building the secure, high performance, resilient, and efficient infrastructure for applications. How do you manage the secret and then sensitive information? Store parameter. AWS Secret Manager or the AWS System Manager parameter store no secretly, securely store and manage the sensitive information. What are the best practices for Amazon API Gateway? API Gateway best enable the caching, throttling request, and use the custom domain names for better performance and then security in the API management. How do you implement the cross account access in the AWS? Cross account access. Use IAM roles with the trusted relationships that allow the resources in one account to the another account resources in any other account securely. Use IAM roles with the trust relationship to allow the resources in one AWS account to the access resources in another account securely. What is Amazon Aurora, and how does it differ from the traditional RDS? Aurora is a MySQL and then Postgres SQL compatible relational database designed for high performance and then availability with automatic replication across the AZs. How do you handle the data consistency in distributed AWS application? Implement the eventual consistency model and use DynamoDB transactions and design for conflict resolution strategies. Mind எங்க இருக்கணும்? Data consistency பத்தி சொல்றான். Okay. Eventual consistency module use DynamoDB transaction and then design for conflict resolution strategy. Okay. What is AWS Step Functions and how it is used? Step Functions is a serverless orchestration service that allow you to coordinate multiple AWS services into the complex workflows. How do you set up the monitor alerts for the AWS resources? Create the CloudWatch alarm based on the metrics, setting the threshold to notify you of changes in the performance or the usage. What are the different type of Amazon EC2 instances? How do you choose one? EC2 offers various instance types that optimize to different workloads, such as compute memory storage, those based on the application requirement. How do you implement multi-region architecture? Deploy resources in multiple AWS region, configure cross region replication, and use Route 53 for DNS failover. What is AWS Lambda Edge? எல்லாமே வந்தது இதுல. Okay. AWS Lambda Edge. How does it extend the Lambda's capabilities? Lambda Edge allows you to run the Lambda functions in response to CloudFront events, enabling the customization of content delivery. How do you secure application deployed on the AWS? Implement the security groups, network ACL, IAM roles, and then conduct regular security assessment and audits. What are the challenges of deploying the application in multi-cloud environment? Challenge includes the data integration, management, complexity, security concerns, and varying the service availability across the providers. How do you leverage AWS Glue for the data integration? AWS Glue is a managed ETL service that automates the data preparation and integration, enabling the seamless data movement between the services. I don't know what is that. What is Amazon EKS, and then when you use it? Amazon EKS is a managed Kubernetes service for deploying the containerized applications, providing the scalability and then easy of management. Containerized applications, okay. How do you optimize a serverless application performance பத்தி கேக்குறோம். uh, Minimize the cold stats by keeping the functions warm, optimize the function code size, and then use the efficient data access patterns. What is the purpose of AWS organization? AWS organization basically that allows you to manage multiple AWS accounts centrally, applying policies and then consolidating the billing. How do you set up the cross region replication? Cross region replication, enabling the cross region replication in the S3 bucket settings, specifying the destination bucket in another region. What are the differences between the AWS CloudTrail and then AWS CloudWatch? CloudTrail records API calls for auditing. CloudWatch monitors the resources metrics and then application logs in the real time. Real time audit. Okay. How do you implement the blue green deployment? This we already saw. Use Elastic Beanstalk or EC2 with the load balancer to switch the traffic between two environments, reducing the downtime during the deployments. What is the Amazon Cloud Formation Stack Set? Stack Set allows you to create, update, delete the CloudFormation stacks across multiple accounts and regions in a single operation. How do you handle version for AWS Lambda functions? Use Alias to point to different versions of a Lambda function, allowing for safe rollbacks and then staged deployment. What are the security implications of using public subnets in the VPC? Public subnets exposes resources to the internet, required strict group rules, policies, and then careful management of inbound traffic. How can Amazon Elastic file system in a distributed application? EFS provides a scalable file storage solution for multiple EC2 instances, facilitating shared access to data across instances. What is AWS System Manager, and how does it improve the operations? System Manager provides a unified interface for managing the AWS resources, automating tasks, and ensuring compliances. How do you configure a secure VPC endpoint for S3 access? Create VPC endpoints for S3 and update the bucket policies to allow access from the VPC, ensuring the traffic does not go over the public internet. What is Amazon Route 53? How does it supports DNS management? Route 53 is a scalable DNS web service that offers domain registration, DNS routing, and health checking for high availability. How do you use Amazon Kinesis and for real-time data processing? Kinesis, streams, collects, and process the real-time data, enabling applications to respond quickly to events and changes. What are advantages of AWS Trail Transit gateway. Transit gateway simplifies the network architecture by connecting multiple VPCs and an on-premises network, providing a centralized routing hub. How do you set up the Amazon Redshift cluster for data analytics? Launch a Redshift cluster, configure the nodes and then security settings, and use SQL queries to analyze the data stored in the Redshift. What are the implications of use imperial storage in the EC2? Imperial storage is temporary and the data is lost when the instance or stopped or terminated. Use it for no transit data. How do you optimize the performance of DynamoDB table? Design the table with appropriate partition key, use global index, and optimize the read write capacity settings. What is Amazon EBS and what types of volumes does it provide? EBS is block storage for EC2, offer SSD and HDD volume for various performance needs, including the general purpose and then provisioned IOPS. How do you enforce compliance and then governance in the AWS? Use AWS config to track the resources configuration, enable CloudTrail for auditing, and apply policies through the AWS organization. What are AWS service limits and how can they affect the architecture design? AWS services limits defines the maximum resources you can provision, design architecture considering these limits, and plan for scaling. How do you implement the server-side encryption in the S3? Enable the server-side encryption in the S3 bucket settings, choosing options like SSC, SC, and so on, KMS, and then C. What is the AWS code artifact and how do it benefit development team? Code artifact is a fully managed artifact repository for storing and then sharing the software packages, streamlining dependency management. How do you set up the Amazon CloudFront to service static assets? Create a CloudFront distribution with the origin set to an S3 bucket, configure the caching behavior, and then specifying the SSL settings. What are the challenges of managing the state in the serverless architecture? Serverless applications need external services like DynamoDB or S3 for state management, increasing the complexity and then potential latency. How do you secure the API endpoints in the AWS? You use API gateway with the AWS IAM or Lambda authorizer, implement the throttling, and then enable the logging for monitoring. What is AWS AppSync and how does it support the GraphQL API? AWS Sync is a managed service that simplifies the development of a GraphQL API, integrating with various data sources like DynamoDB and then Lambda. How do you implement the caching strategy in the AWS applications? Use Elastic Cache for in-memory caching and then implement the CloudFront for caching static assets to reduce the latency. What is AWS backup and how does it supports the data protection? AWS backup centralizes and automates the backup process to AWS resources, simplifying the compliance and then recovery management. How do you monitor the performance of the web application on AWS? Utilize the CloudWatch, for metrics, set up dashboards, enabling the X-ray for tracing requests to diagnose the performance. இதெல்லாம் வச்சு monitor பண்ணிக்கலாம். What are AWS layers? How do they enhance the functionality? Lambda layers allow you package the libraries and dependencies separately from the function code, promoting code reuse, and simplifying the management. How do you implement the multi-tenancy in the AWS architecture? Design with resource isolation, use IAM for tenant specific access, and apply network segmentation for the data security. What is Amazon QuickSight and how does it support data visualization? QuickSight is a scalable BI service that provides a data visualization and business intelligence capabilities for AWS data sources. How can you use AWS Secrets Manager to manage the credentials? Secrets Manager secure store manages and then rotates secrets like database credentials and then API keys. What are AWS CloudFormation drift detection capabilities? Drift detection identifies the differences between the deployed resources and the CloudFormation template, helping maintain the compliance. How do you handle the data access, and identify the management in the AWS? IAM, fine-grained access control, enforce the policies, and then regularly, review the permissions to maintain the security. What is AWS Glue data catalog and how it is now used. Glue data catalog is a metadata repository for managing the data sets, enabling the efficient data discovery and then ETL process. How do you implement for microservices architecture on the AWS? Centralized log using the Amazon CloudWatch logs or logging the services like ELK to aggregate and analyze the logs for the multiple services. What are the best practices for deploying the applications with AWS Elastic Beanstalk? Configure the environment settings, use versioning for deployments, and enabling the monitoring for application health. How do you optimize the AWS RDS for performance? Read replicas, optimize the queries, and monitoring the performance metrics to identify and then resolve bottleneck. What is AWS WAF? Does it protect web application? AWS WAF is an application firewall that helps protect application from common web exploits and allow the custom rules creation. How can you implement the VPC peering and what are its limitations? VPC peering connects two VPCs to route the traffic between them. Limitation includes not being able to transitive peering. What is the purpose of AWS IAM policies? IAM policies defines the permissions for AWS resources, allowing you to specify what actions users and then role can perform. How do you use Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service to manage the container? EKS simplifies the Kubernetes management and automating the task like scaling and then upgrade while integrating with other AWS services. What are the benefit of using AWS Service Catalog? Service Catalog enables the organization to create and manage the approved catalog of IT services for consistent resource planning. How do you configure the security group for the AWS resources? Security groups acts as virtual firewall, allowing you to define the inbound and then outbound traffic rules for resources. What are the advantages of AWS Cloud9 for the development? The Cloud9 provides a cloud-based IDE with the collaboration features and enable development without local environment setup. How can you use the CI/CD pipeline with the AWS pipeline? Code pipeline automates the build, test, deploy the phases, integrating with the services like code build and then code deploy for the seamless workflow. What is the AWS inspector and how does it enhance the security? AWS inspector is an automated security assessment service that helps identify vulnerabilities in the application deployed on the AWS. How do you use AWS auto scaling to manage the application load? Configure the auto scaling groups based on the demand, allowing easy to instances to scale it in and scale out automatically. What are Amazon EBS snapshot and how does they work? EBS snapshots are no backup of EBS volume stored in the S3, enabling pinpoint point in time recovery data. How do you ensure the compliance with the AWS shared responsibility model? Understand your responsibilities for securing the applications and the data while leveraging the AWS security measures for the infrastructure. What are the best practices for network design in the AWS? Use VPC, subnet, NAT gateway, and security group to create a secure and then scalable network architecture. How do you monitor user activity in the AWS? Enable CloudTrail for logging API calls and use AWS config to track changes in the resource configuration. What is AWS Outpost and how does it extend the AWS services on premises? AWS Outpost brings the native AWS services to on-premises environment, enabling by hybrid cloud architectures. How do you implement a data lake in the AWS? Amazon S3 for storage, AWS Glue for data catalog and then ETL, and Amazon Athena for querying the data. What are the different S3 between the S3 and then EFS? S3 is object storage for unstructured data, while EFS is a file system for shared across instances. How can you set up the multi-factor authentication in the AWS? Enable MFA in the IAM settings for users and role to add the additional layer of the security during the sign-in. What is the significance of AWS well-architected tool? The AWS well-architected tool helps you to evaluate your architecture against the best practices, providing the insights for improvement. That's all.